announcement?
I want to make sure like we start live and it sounds okay, and then I'll do it.
And I guess you can check from your end if the podcast is working well.
Yeah, all I see is the overlay, like deafen.
Cool, and this should be how it looks like when we're all talking.
All right, it's good. I'm gonna send.
Is it? Let's see. Yep, it is. We got people coming in. Let's go.
All right, nice. 65 people. But did you add everyone, or did you just? Oh wait, TK.
Wait, what happened?
Everyone in Twitch chat just says we were mentioned.
Wait.
Oh. Oh no.
Do you see announcements or? Huh.
Wait, why didn't I get mentioned? Wait, where? Huh?
But you just have the server muted, probably. Okay.
I
I
don't.
don't have it either. Wait.
Yeah, I didn't get a
where's the
mention
Twitch
either.
thing?
Yeah, where did they get pinged?
Huh?
Apparently we woke up people. Oh, it was a Twitch mention. Okay, okay. That's fine.
Oh,
What's our Twitch? I gotta get access to the chat stuff. That's a real question.
Yeah, WangshengFP, I think.
Yeah, yeah.
Gotcha.
Well, hello guys. We're gonna be having a podcast on the 2 new characters coming out. With us, I have my co-lead Emiliabyss, and we have Monochrom, a senior theory crafter at Keqing, and the wonderful Zajef 77, who streams on Twitch. All right.
Hello. I was on the first one, but I've returned.
It's Emiliabyss, by the way.
Yeah, this is going to be the second episode I was in. I wasn't in the last one due to just traveling for a month or so, but I'm back and I'm pretty excited about the 2 new characters. I'm definitely interested in playing them out once they come in live. All right, so I guess we can switch to this. So, you guys have any initial reactions on Wanderer and like thoughts that you want to just talk about?
He seems fun, at least. I don't like his combos.
His combos?
Yeah. I don't know. His kit seems like something that I would not personally enjoy very much.
Okay.
Oh my god. I'm sure frame counting him will be a nightmare on live. Like,
Yeah,
holy
he's
shit.
an attack speed variable character for like a lot of people.
List user, oh my god. That is just omega fucking cringe.
Like 70% of the TC work was just figuring out the damn combos.
Yeah.
It's like Ito flashbacks. Except in this circumstance, it actually like does matter more.
Oh no, we're gonna lose staff to that again.
Oh yeah.
I'm actually excited to play him because I just wanted an animal on-field unit that could drive from afar. Legitimately, I remember talking to Azel about this. I just told him I just want Animo Yoimiya, and he's somewhat like that, except he flies a bit, which is kind of neat. At least just for my account, I tend to have very overinvested like units that work with drivers, so I don't mind his inclusion as much. Although I do think it's interesting that his partner unit Faruzan is added to the game, because now we kind of have another piece for people who want to play more Animo specific teams, like focusing on just Animo damage rather than the chain reactions from Swirl.
Yeah, although
yeah, we're gonna talk about her problems in a bit, but yes,
yeah,
I don't think she
boy.
fully completes the Animo ecosystem quite yet. There's still some things that are missing, notably a character with extremely high like off-field damage that can also utilize her buff. I know Kazuha has really good motion values in general, but he isn't quite designed to like be the off-field unit for an Animo team, I'd say. Like if you wanted to do a mono Animo team, his kit is like just works well just because it's tuned highly, but definitely there's one more character that does off-field damage, like a high amount, like 𝐒𝐭𝐚 would be fantastic for mono Animo. So, okay. Emmy, do you want to talk about the things our TC team came up for Wanderer, just for like people who are not really familiar with how the character plays and how to build them, whatnot? Or anything notable you want to mention about him?
Okay, so basically, like the TLDR, the rundown. So we initially were trying to talk about two different builds, right? We're on one hand, we could run, full EM and we can use him as a driver. I don't like this idea because it just feels like bad sucrose to me.
Mm-hmm.
And so it might just be like a transitory, like I remember you and I talked about this, that you said it might be a transitory stage. Like if you can't get the artifacts and stuff that Wanderer needs, then like that could work for the meantime. But he really cares about the typical stats like attack, damage, and crit. So it's just another ADC character. He's another character kind of like how Nilo was, where you don't really have to burst every rotation. You can burst every other rotation and it's fine. Like when I did the math, and I try to calc like even like very generous, like as low as like 140 ER requirements if you wanted to burst every rotation. And I know in most cases he needs more than this, right? But even when your energy recharge was like that low, you still did like 60k more damage per rotation without bursting at all, or bursting every other rotation.
His burst is just not good enough to justify how much ER he needs. If you like, so it's better to just go for the other rotation stuff.
It's such a cool animation too, and it's like they always give like the coolest animations the least amount of love for some reason. Because I love the steppy burst, but yeah, it's just not very useful if you care about maximizing your damage, which is like if you're on a TC podcast, that's probably what you're interested in, right?
Yeah,
I'd
say even people that like aren't in TC, like watching TC podcasts and that interested in TC content, generally the bigger number is like more serotonin, and higher ER means that you don't get as big numbers. So
you're still right.
Yes, very big monkey brain optimization. We're not optimizing damage, we're optimizing dopamine.
Yeah, yes. That's why like all the damage per screenshot stuff on YouTube works, because people just like seeing big numbers. They don't care about what it takes to get those numbers, whether it's like 1500 Spiral Abyss resets.
And one thing I do like about characters that aren't dependent on bursting every rotation is, for a lot of like newer players, it's less likely that your build just breaks if you just can't meet a certain requirement. At least for Wanderer's case, it just gives a lot more freedom for building him. There are definitely characters in this game where if you don't meet your energy requirement, your character breaks apart, and either your team depends on the bursts to all do like your team synergies, or that's the majority of your damage, and it really sucks if you can't burst on cooldown. But for characters like Yai and Wanderer, they can not worry about that as much because a lot of their kit is in other forms of damage. For him would be normal attacks for the most part, and the occasional charge attacks depending on the situation. Now, one thing I want to ask about is what did you guys come up with for differences between using his normal attack and charge attack? Because they do have slightly different properties. With the charge attack applying 2U of Animo, which is pretty significant, and having a slightly larger AoE radius. How would you advise people?
It's more
to
than
use
slightly.
it? Yeah, okay. It is larger for sure, but it looks. I think it looks bigger than how it actually hits, but I haven't been able to follow it too closely.
So I had a few thoughts on this. The first one is that there's 3 different kind of ways you can play him. You can do the N3 spam, where you're just normal attack spamming, and most of his kit cares about normal attacks as opposed to charge attacks. For example, his signature weapon focuses on normal attacks, right? You can N2C, so 2 normal attacks canceled by a charge attack, and you can squeeze out a little bit more damage from the weapons, or in this third case, we have the Dodoko rotation. And Dodoko Tails is hilarious on Wanderer because if you just charge attack spam and you just do enough normal attacks to keep the buff up, it outperforms some 5-star weapons. And I find that hilarious.
Who's the weapon really for?
Dodoko Tails?
I guess him.
Yeah.
Yeah, the first user. So for artifacts, he is getting a you would call a signature artifact set on his release. Now, it seems like it's built very well for him, but how would you recommend new players with managing their resin for that artifact set? Should they keep farming the new set, or should they just be satisfied with current sets that they have that perform pretty well, such as Shimenawa's, or just even parts of Animo sets, or even VV if you're playing him with more support?
I would say you should get the artifact set. You should save up your resin. You should get the artifact set because it's 10% better than the next best thing, and so the other artifacts just don't really get the job done. You can run Shimenawa, but if you do, you might even have trouble bursting every other rotation with Shimenawa.
Mm-hmm.
And that just sucks, right? Because imagine only bursting every 3rd rotation. I mean, it's still a nice buff, right? That he definitely appreciates the Shimenawa 4-piece, but the cost is so great, and you're also still getting 10% worse damage. And typically, I think if there's a 5% jump or more, then it's worth it. And so I'd say, what I'm doing in my game, I just ate up all of my resin from all of this patch and last patch. So I'm just gonna go ham on that dungeon and just get it all flushed out.
Okay. Any comments to Jeff about his artifact sets?
It's kind of just... It's good. I don't have much to say about it. I'd say a lot of characters, it's really nice to get their artifact sets, but in a lot of situations, your character isn't that large of a portion of your team's DPS.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to hyper carries, that's generally not going to be the case. Generally, they're a pretty much a larger portion of your team's DPS, and then something like a 5 to 10% increase, instead of being something that is hard to justify, becomes something that's that's actually pretty good. So yeah, I think his artifact set is solid, nothing crazy, but pretty okay-ish.
Yeah. So yeah, at least for me, I know I'm definitely going to be sitting on 4VV until I can transition into a strong set for him. But I'd imagine it's for most people, it's very dependent on what kind of teams you plan on playing with them, because there are teams where he is a smaller portion of the team damage, and then there's teams where you basically stuff him with a bunch of buffs to make him really perform well. And I guess it's really hard just to talk about him without talking about Faruzan, isn't it? But
Yeah.
Like almost every possible team that you would ever wander on, you need Faruzan.
I don't know if I agree with that.
That's cool. Give me your reasons.
Like, if she's C6, sure. But if she's
C6
not,
is a different story. C6 is nuts.
But if she's not C6, I don't think at C0 she's I don't think the difference in output is going to be very big, basically.
yeah, at least for me, if I don't have C6, I wouldn't be playing her, even with Wanderer. Just because, personally, I also think the gameplay has a bit of a... It doesn't feel good, having to do the charge attack. It's the same speed as Sara, which is twice the charge up time as 𝐒𝐭𝐚, for example, if you only have 𝐒𝐭𝐚 to reference. Also, there's currently a very weird thing going on with Faruzan where her burst shred, the shred component of her burst happens in a triangle, and the circles don't really overlap that much. So you actually don't have like really good uptime on the shred unless you just manipulate the enemies really well to touch the triangles at the right spots. Because each time they get hit, the debuff lasts for like just 4 seconds. Now, if you have C6, that gets fixed in a way because the off-field skills will shred for you, and you don't have to worry about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree with both of you. Like, at C6, Faruzan, like, you definitely want C6 Faruzan. Like, if you only have, like, C0 or C2, you can get away with, like, using somebody else.
Like, what? I'm, like, sitting here wondering what the comparison is. Is it just a TTDS holder with Noblesse or Tenacity? Well, what are we?
Things that he wants right now is either buffs or ways to mitigate getting staggered. So very popular forms of anti-stagger would be like shields like from Zhongli or Layla. And then also there's forms of damage reduction like Xingqiu or Beidou that can make him not get staggered as much, which is kind of like nice for his kit, because if you have to dodge, if you don't have his passive up that refunds his stamina, you're taking uptime hits, because like it's gonna drain his bar, which kind of sucks.
You lose like a whole N3 combo if every time you dash too early before his A4 procs, and that's so much damage that you're missing.
I do remember on average you get a free dash essentially from your passive if you do 3 auto attacks, but there is some like deviation depending on how lucky you are. So there is a percentage of players where it's going to take 5, and that's really kind of like not fun to play around. If you're really skilled, you can basically bank on that as a dodge resource and not use it as soon as it comes up, and that's probably the recommended way to play it. Just because like you don't want to have a situation where you're dodging without that ability activated.
Should we explain exactly what the A4 does?
Yeah, sure.
Probably.
So every time you attack with him, you get a chance to get a stack for his A4. And if you don't activate it on the hit you use, the next attack will increase the chances by like an X% the next time. So when you do the average of it, it usually takes 3 auto attacks. But there is deviation depending on how lucky you are. So it might take 5 or 6 if you're unlucky, and that can really suck. So my current recommendation is to not use the dash to whenever it's up, because it does like do a little bit of damage, but it's probably just there to mitigate the damage loss when you need to dash, is how it's probably intended to be used.
Yeah, I kind of like, I enjoy looking at it as more of a way of like, if you're really skilled with the character and you get really used to that sort of rhythm, it's a nice little damage bonus because like if you time it well, you can get like a 5, maybe 10% damage increase. But again, if you mess it up at any point, you sort of kneecap all that advantage that you would have had anyway. So it's nice to have, but for like when I did calculations, I did not assume doing A4 procs because again, it's sort of like a high risk, high reward sort of thing. Well, not even high reward. It's like medium reward. It's okay.
I guess risky strategies like that are always going to exist for these characters, huh? But I guess it's especially risky for him since I've seen like he gets shot out of the sky instantly.
Yeah, he's like paper. If you poke him with anything,
Oh boy,
he just pops and
Yes.
collapses. So it's like,
Thankfully, he flies back up. So there's that at least. But yeah, it's not ideal to get knocked out of there at all. Especially how some enemies, they'll use their more annoying attacks if you're like too far away. And flying up does put extra distance sometimes.
Oh, so it's the same as the Xiao problem. So if
Right.
on Ruin Guards, it'll just be missile spam.
Yeah.
I'm waiting for the fan art of like Hilichurls throwing shit at him to knock him out of the sky.
I can't wait for the literal throwing a rock down his ass.
Just like throwing a rock at his head.
Oh my god.
Oh yeah,
I
we
need
should
art
probably
of that.
talk about his absorption buffs, right? That's the A1? Yeah.
Yeah. Another thing. When I first went into that, I thought that was gonna be so many calcs. I was like, oh, we need to do like 11 calcs per weapon and per artifact set, but the buffs, like you want pyro and you kind of want cryo, but it's hard to control anyway, right? I mean, except for pyro. Pyro is super easy because you just automatically get it with the Bennett burst.
I'm kind of not a big fan of that talent in a way, because oftentimes it's the thing that bugs me about it is it's not necessarily consistent unless you're aiming for pyro and hydro, because those override everything in the priority chain. So like if you have cryo in your team, if you fight anything that has residual auras, it's gonna suck up the other buff. And the main hit on that is particularly the electro one. You don't really build around, like I wouldn't recommend building around the electro buff, like your energy requirements. So if you're not building around it, then it doesn't really help you. And the reason why you don't want to build around it is you don't want to invest like a little bit more energy and need it to be able to burst every like 2 rotations or every 1 rotation sometimes, depending on your team energy economy. So the fact that it's not dependable makes it not as valuable, because it's just kind of awkward. I will agree that the cryo buff is pretty strong alongside the pyro buff, but I don't know. Like the hydro one's kind of nice for if you just need to dodge and you won't get as punished, but sometimes you don't want to use the full duration anyways, like the full extra duration that hydro gives. It just kind of depends on what kind of buffs you're running, because some might run out or whatnot.
Yeah, and like hydro is the second priority because it's the same as Kazu's, right? So it goes pyro,
Yes.
hydro, cryo, electro, or is it
Pyro,
cryo at the
hydro,
bottom?
electro, cryo is the order.
Oh, so cryo's at the bottom. Yeah, so
Yes.
I kind of I like electro, but I agree that you should not worry about like building your team around it, because 1, it's really hard to get the electro infusion, and 2, like the most it really does is it lets you burst slightly more often. So like I've heard some people throw around like 2/3 tempo in the sense of like sometimes you might burst 2 times out of 3 rotations. That might be one of those cases where like if you manage to infuse the electro incidentally, you can get a little bit more damage out of it. But it's probably like 3rd place. Yeah, like right under pyro and cryo.
Thoughts on this, Zajef? like anything from like a design standpoint of the talent or how useful one of them are?
I don't know. I think they're all like. I mean, I like the Pyro and Cryo one because obviously like they're the number go ones, but
You
I don't
don't get the
honestly. I don't really
serotonin.
know.
It just seems boring. Like out of like,
Yeah, it's kind of just boring.
I really wish it did something kind of more interesting than that, because it's just like there, like kind of almost like Nahida's thing with her having different party members have like elements, but at least that's very controllable because you just have to field the unit into your team rather than
Mhm.
having it on the field, so you can build around it and have consistent results.
Also, just for my math, so like there is a priority of like which buffs are the best and which are the worst, but the difference also, it's not huge.
Yeah, it's very
So,
minor.
Yeah, so like that's why I put down like you shouldn't be building around this infusion because like all the buffs are like relative. They're not equivalent, but they're at least comparable. And so if you're absorbing 2 elements, you're gonna get around like 25-30% more damage if you on personal damage. And if you get one of the infusions, you're probably getting like 10-15% more damage. And just whether it's on the low end or high end of that scale, just depends on whether it's pyro, cryo, whatever.
Does it inform like team building? Like how does it? What combinations? So I'm seeing like pyro and cryo. So you're pairing him in like an off-field melt team. What? How do we accomplish getting both of those?
That's the
I
thing
mean-
is you don't want to team build around it because it's
Yeah,
awkward.
you don't want to.
So you can't or
yeah.
don't want to.
It's
So
not that.
Yeah, on top of
Like,
the
there's-
fact that it can suck up whatever the enemy is holding too. So if there's like a pyro node in Abyss or a Hilichurl with a torch, you're gonna get the electro or cryo jacked off of the main. If there's any hydro, it's just it's a nice boost for him, but not something you should consciously think about, I'd say.
Like there are ways to make it happen with like pyro cryo, for example, because again, you wouldn't be doing it to get the pyro and cryo buffs, but they'd be like an incidental sort of buff. But like, let's say if you're running like Wanderer Faruzan, like Layla for the defensive option for the shield, and that's going to be an easy cryo infusion, and then Bennett's burst is also going to be an easy pyro infusion. So it's like you're not necessarily building for those infusions. Bennett and Layla both have jobs that they're doing, and they just happen to also give these buffs sometimes.
So it's just another superfluous element of her kit, I guess.
Somewhat.
Yeah.
Wanderer's kit. Sorry, I'm on Faruzan. Oops.
All right. You guys want to talk about how C0 Faruzan is? Since I think that's something that a lot of players are going to be like dealing with, or basically anything below
boy.
C6, because I think people underestimate how many pulls it takes to get a C6 of a new character. If
They
you were
do.
to try
They
to,
do.
yeah, if you do the statistics on it, you're likely gonna either get like C1 Scaramouche or like C2 or 3, depending on your luck. And
Yeah, like when oh, go ahead, sorry.
And the problem I have with that is I'm not particularly a fan of his early constellations, to be honest. So
They're
something
not
I would
amazing.
usually recommend if you're trying to pull for efficiency is you just stop whenever you get the Scaramouche, and then you wait for future banners that have Faruzan and a character you want to get. Because if you try to just shoot for C6 Faruzan, you're gonna have a lot of these constellations that are kind of for Wanderer. At least in my opinion, I don't like how little they give. Because Primo gems are expensive if you want to swipe, or they're pretty difficult to get if you just want to play free to play.
So what was your take, Emmy?
So, man, Faruzan, I like Faruzan, but I think C2 is pretty important. She has a Kutosara problem where it's like she needs C2 to be like minimally functional, in my opinion.
What's her C2 again?
It's the duration increase, I believe.
Yeah, the duration increase. So it just like secures the DPS boost.
Yeah.
Well,
and
I
then
have a counterpoint on that though. How long does the current one last? It lasts for
It's
it lasts
enough
for 12
for
already.
it's enough for Scaramouche. It's not enough for Xiao, basically.
Yeah, because like once you're doing Wanderer's rotation, you end your flight time pretty close to when it would normally end. So if you extend it further, it doesn't really give you as much, I'd say. This is like
I think
an awkward thing about her.
Yeah, true. Like, I think C2 is important also because, like, I like factoring in human error a lot. And I don't like assuming that C0 Faruzan's always going to be totally okay because it doesn't have to trigger on each hit of the triangle that it's doing.
Yeah, so each hit will apply the debuff for 4 seconds, but the radius for getting the buff on your characters is much larger. Like, you're basically going to get the animo bonus damage. But the shred is very conditional since it only lasts very briefly, 4 seconds, which is kind of problematic. So if any of the corners miss, you're not going to have buffs for a little bit till the thing returns back.
Like, I'm shooting for C6 Faruzan because it's quite an insane DPS increase for the whole team. It's like, what, like 10 or 15k DPS increase for the team when you have C6, which is, it's nuts. But at the same time, when Rosaria first came out, because Rosaria is my favorite character in Genshin Impact, and I wanted C6 Rosaria the day she came out, I had to get C4 Tartaglia before I can get a C6 Rosaria. And it's just like, that's not something I can recommend to the average person. That's like, I spent like easily 400 USD or more.
Yeah, it's expensive to rush for a C6 on a character.
Like, you can buy a PS5 with that. Like, you can either have
you can buy a
C6
good game.
Faruzan. Yeah, you can either have C6 Faruzan or you can buy like a PlayStation 5. So take your pick.
So yeah, like I said, the pulling strategy I'd recommend for people who are conscious about their primo gems is patience. It's pretty difficult, but I think you get a lot more efficient pulls if you kind of stop once you get Wanderer and just whenever she comes around again, you put a couple more wishes in one towards a different 5-star character that you do enjoy or like, because let's be real, most people will like at least one out of like the 3 characters they release in the future. There's not too many people who just only play like or who only want to just have a couple characters. Like, this game does try its best to like shoot out a variety.
Yeah, it's good that there's not a whole lot of redundancy. There's just redundancy where it actually enriches the decision making, like kind of like how Rosaria did.
What was that about Rosaria?
So like we talked about it before, I think, but the whole off-field melt thing became like actually really interesting with Rosaria and Kaya together. So in a sense, like even though they are redundant, it's still opening new doors because you can play them together. And then another example of this would be Yelan.
Yeah.
So, double Hydro Revolution.
I hear someone really cool worked on Elon. Someone, we don't know. Just like someone of some reputable status. Someone who's, smart and funny and... KB, it was you, right?
No. I appreciate the compliments, but someone in the Twitch chat is asking, will she also be able to have her own buff for her second rotation with C2? And one thing I do want to mention about that is I don't think you want to factor that into whether you get C2 or not, because her personal damage is generally not that good. Mainly because you have to shove so much ER stat into her until you get C6. But
yeah,
you'll be able to benefit from her own buff in the rotation if she has C2. That is correct, but I wouldn't get baited about that. So I guess did we talk about why C6 was so essential yet here? I don't think we did, right?
No, we were talking about like C2 and below.
It does everything.
Oh, okay. Let's go to C4 just so we can talk about that too. Oh, and C1, so we can get those out of the way. So C1 lets her fire 2 arrows with fully charged shots, and that sounds really nice. Except there's a cooldown that she has before she can generate more particles with her charge shot. Because basically how it works is when she fires the charge shot, when that explodes, she gets particles. And the cooldown is like about 5 or 6 seconds to get more energy from it. So unfortunately, you can't really abuse that constellation that much. If you were planning on playing like some weird quick swap team, it can be used, but those are pretty niche right now. At least the ones I can think of. Anyone else have any thoughts on C1?
I mean, it does stuff.
All right, yeah, it's cringe. All right, C4.
Brilliant.
C4 gives her slightly more energy when her charge shot happens, right? And there's like a max cap. I think this is like, it's nice just reading from the text, but the numbers are so low for how much it gives her.
Yeah, it's kind of like Sarah's energy generation passive, like Ascension passive.
Yeah, it's like, who cares? Like, you definitely don't
Honestly,
want to build around it. I don't know.
I literally forgot that Sarah had an energy restoration Ascension passive.
Yeah. It's like, what, 1 per 100 energy she has above 100?
1.2.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry.
It's like, the effect is cool, like, conceptually, but it's so weak with the numbers that it's basically not doing anything.
Yes, yeah. That's seems to be the case for some things in her kit already. It's just like the text is cool, but it's not tuned to be like super useful. Okay, so C4 is kind of bad. It's like the better one out of C1 and C4, but like I don't know. And then we get to C6, the constellation that kind of does a lot for her. It's been a while since we had a character that was this dependent on a C6, at least for the 4-star cast. I know Candace was pretty dependent on her C6 because she wasn't a unit until then.
Is she even a unit then?
I mean, somewhat. No. You have like some AoE hydro application which you can use in reaction like teams, but it's definitely not a powerful character. It doesn't turn the character from nothing to powerful. It's just it makes her a character to begin with. Like her C6 is more valuable than the rest of her kit.
My whole time TCing her for WFP, I was just like completely depressed with her because like she was just so underwhelming. Even at C6, she's just whelming at best. Not underwhelming, not overwhelming, but whelming.
I wanted to do jank with her, but she can't even do that because MiHoYo thought of it and made overlapping weapon reactions very boring with Hydro.
Yeah.
I was so mad.
Yeah, they
So-
basically said no fun allowed.
Yeah, so her C6, what it does is it makes her buff provide an extra like 40% crit damage for Anemone users, which is pretty darn nice for people like Xiao and Wanderer who depend on crit. And then when the active character like does damage, it'll proc her charge shot on them. And this is pretty significant because, as you guys know, her charge shot is the thing that generates energy. So she gets a couple more instances of energy generation while she's off field, which is pretty nice. Because her burst does cost like 80 energy, and that's extremely difficult to fuel when her E only generates 2 energy per instance. So like without C6, your energy requirements shoot up to like anything between the range of like 280 to like 350, depending on how you set up your team. It's extremely rough and probably difficult for a lot of like players to build around, especially if they don't have good Favonius weapons on their team or whatnot. It's really rough. I wouldn't underestimate how rough it is.
I think if you don't, I mean, at least 5 bow is like the weapon that's given for free, right?
Yes.
But if you've accidentally fed your 5 bow, or if you need it on someone else, like, it's very possible that you literally just can't actually get her burst back every rotation, no matter how much ER you try to build, because you just won't have enough.
And unlike Wanderer, her burst is very important for her kit. It's important to the team. Essentially, because it's the Animo Shred and it's the Animo bonus. And currently, there's not too many ways to Animo Shred. We have Jean C4. We have Venti with constellations, and we have like Zhongli's like Omni Shred. That's like kind of about it, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Faruzan's energy requirements, they almost aren't KQMC legal. Like, if you're calculating by KQM standards, as many of us do, it's almost like not mathematically possible to get all the ER that she needs.
And this is a reminder, our KQM standards are pretty close to what the average theory crafter has, which tends to bias towards being pretty strong because all theory crafters are Giga Chad, right? Because that's we pulled through a survey to see what everyone's artifacts are like, and at least from KQM and WFP, most of our users are at around KQM standards, if not slightly above sometimes. But yeah, for like a normal person, it's probably going to be really rough to build her, because getting ER substats, like stacking it, is very tricky because you can only get it on the sands, and then the rest you have to target one substat, like out of the 4 on your artifact piece for it to roll into, and that's really difficult. It's really easy to get like crit rate, crit damage, because you can have 2 of them on a piece, and you can just RNG 2 out of the 4 pieces, substat lines into getting good stats. But for her, you need energy recharge. Someone in the Twitch chat is asking, is 290 ER with 80% crit rate fav good?
That's pretty good.
That's pretty good.
You should be able to barely get by.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Well, it depends on your constellation and your rotation efficiency. Technically, if you are slow with your rotation, your energy costs do go down. So if you're not playing like super like sharply in general, because what if you're just chilling, the energy requirements become a little bit softer, I guess.
Yeah, most people don't play cleanly anyway. It's like
yeah, but if you're like Mr. Zajef with his frame perfect swaps, your rotation times are going to be tighter, and thus your energy requirements are going to be pretty high, just from playing really well.
Yeah, it's really important to keep that into consideration, because like the amount of human error that goes into like actual gameplay is just so massive compared to like what a lot of people cheat for. So like things might look good on paper, but you also have to keep in mind, like, for example, yeah, sure, Wanderer is gonna cheat super high if you run Yunjin Bennett Faruzan But if he gets hit with like anything, you gotta play around it. You might have to dodge when you don't need
Oh,
to.
we gotta talk about solo 𝐒𝐭𝐚𝐫𝐌𝐚𝐥𝐢𝐚.
Oh,
boy.
the energy requirements
Yeah.
are absurd, and it's hard to
It's
proc Fab.
insane.
I don't think people
Yeah,
realize that you can't just slap Fab on her to fix the problem because
Yeah, because she doesn't have multi-hits.
Yeah.
She doesn't have multi-hits, and unlike the other characters, she doesn't want crit in her base build. She just wants defense. Which means that either you're building crit by ditching defense, or you're not getting good consistency with your Fav.
Yeah.
Don't you
I
only
think-
need like 25% if you have like a not C6, R5 Fav?
I mean, you hit twice at
You have to hit quite a
25%.
bit.
That's in single target. That's gonna be you're generally not gonna get it.
Yeah, I wouldn't
that's true.
recommend something that has anything higher than like a 10% failure rate for most people, because if your rotation breaks because of it, it's like pain.
Mm-hmm. Like I've played some. It was double Geo with Zhongli, but missing the pillar, right? So solo Geo basically. I've played Yunjin Hutao a little bit, and I have, I think, 220 something with 40% crit rate, more or less. And most of the time, like when I missed my pillar, it didn't feel like it was enough because, like, I don't want rotation stuff. I'm gonna need 2, maybe 3 rotations, which means that I need to be able to get the Fav procs 3 times in a row. And when I'm hitting twice with 40% crit rate, well, that's starting to get a little sus, you know.
Yeah.
And basically, my rotations end up needing to be either needing to be just what's the cooldown on her E, like 7.5 or something.
Long enough to be
A few seconds longer, which drives down the DPS like crazy, or I just don't use her burst, which also drives down the DPS because she's taking a slot on the team and not doing anything. It's not that like you can't make it work. It's just that if you're relying on Fav on a unit that doesn't have multi-hits, especially a unit that doesn't particularly want to build crit, like in her base kit, that doesn't scale off of crit particularly well, then your consistency is gonna go like down the drain. And if you want to keep your consistency, you're gonna have to sacrifice a lot of defense.
I distinctly remember I remember I was looking at calcs for certain characters, and I was getting frustrated with the amount of people just like recommending Fab with weird builds to like fix the problems. So I remember just getting fed up and making like a Favonius success rate calculator for WFP's bot, just so people chill out with like throwing random Fab Yunjin on the team and thinking it'll like be okay. Because like you can, if you specify, like Zajef says, like multiple rotations, you have to have multiple successes in a row, and that sucks. Like it might not be a big deal if you're like super strong and you just solo clear like really quickly, but like at that point, if you're that strong, you're probably gonna have enough ER to not depend on Fab as much, or absurdly high crit rate that it doesn't matter anyways. Okay, I know people are probably going to be talking about this a lot. What do you guys think about Xiao's state now that Faruzan is in the game, or going to be in the game? I know a lot of players, Xiao players, have been waiting for a long time for an Animo support, like thematically that makes his damage better, because when people play Xiao, they want him to do a lot of damage. And outside of Bennett and somewhat Zhongli, he didn't really have many characters that could skyrocket his damage. Yeah, what do you guys think about Faruzan bringing value to Xiao?
I mean, he gets a bit of a buff. I think people don't realize how hard it is for more casual players to consolidate their AoE properly, like in general.
Mm-hmm.
And Xiao makes that so much easier. And like having watched a bunch of streams and having caught streams from people who don't play the game that much, don't theorycraft, anything like that, I mean, no character will ever perform in practice how they do in cheats. There's always going to be, like, even if it's literally just fucking ping, right? Like, you can't get the perfect theoretical output. You can get close to it, but you can't get exactly perfect. But the thing about Xiao is I think that the gap between the theoretical output and the practical output is not actually that big for people who are kind of just playing it really casually, which is a pretty huge upside that he has that a lot of other characters don't have, and mostly that people often just disregard. He's not particularly great, but he overperforms for casual players, basically. And I mean that's something that's valuable to have. I think that with Faruzan, I honestly don't actually think that it's gonna be. I mean, I don't know. It's hard to tell before actually like giving her a real try. But I think if you have her C6, it's gonna make him easier to play, like even easier to play, because you're generating particles while Xiao is on field, which makes it just a lot easier to meet the energy requirements. Don't have to think about it as much. Most people are they see the shiny crit value and they just ditch their energy recharge piece, and sometimes don't actually get enough. So being able to get that energy generated like while you're on field rather than while you're not can be pretty valuable. And then I mean, yeah, like that's really nice. But I think that if you don't have her C6, Faruzan's probably just gonna make Xiao feel more clunky to play.
Yeah, you have to worry about triangle impact, and
yeah,
I don't like how little energy she generates at C0 too. And I know Xiao suffers from energy problems if you can't clear quickly enough, because he has some like pre-funneling techniques that only last for like 2 rotations, and once you get to the third one, that's when you can run into issues. Someone in the Twitch chat asked, Xiao doesn't generate particles on his bursts. Would that be a problem because of Faruzan's energy requirements? I don't think that's necessarily a problem, because most people use their skill before using his burst. So it always generates particles, and you just hold on to it until your burst is over. The next one. I'm not particularly a Xiao player though, so I could have that detail wrong, but most just press EE and then Q.
I mean, the fun thing, you can run triangle impact and circle impact, and then together you can have geometry impact.
Yeah.
We're gonna get all the shapes.
I also agree with Zajef on the fact that she kind of makes his gameplay a little bit more complicated if she's not C6, because you have a lot of more variables now, and there is something nice about her C6 arrows having like minor grouping. It kind of keeps the enemies together more slightly when he's spamming plunge attacks. It can kind of make it easier to keep them in a certain area. Although Zhao's AoEs is pretty big, or pretty large in general. What do you guys think about triple Animo teams right now with Faruzan? Like anyone that uses like Kazuha or Venti off-field damage instead of focusing on Swirl. You guys think that Faruzan has decent performance in it, or good performance in those teams?
Yeah, I mean, you can just add Venti or Kazuha in your Xiao or your Scaramouche team, and it's gonna work.
Yeah.
And the grouping is really nice, and having actual synergy with the rest of your team on top of the grouping is also really nice. So yeah, it's pretty good.
Well, who would be the fourth, the non-Animo?
You have
Do
a
you
couple of
need one?
options.
Bennett
Let's go mono Animo. Like
Hell yeah.
cash the
or
meat.
Jean. Jean, if you have some constellations on Jean, she gives some additional shred, right?
Surely, if you have a C4 gene.
Yeah, just get C4 Jean.
Oh yeah, definitely.
That is a very powerful team, though. If you, for some reason, got 5 genes, C4 gene does work really well in mono Animo teams. I'm seeing a lot of people liking the idea of slotting C4 Gene with like Bennett to get some Sunfire procs, and mainly it's for like
Yeah.
Wanderer if you want, and you'll still get Pyro buff from him. It's kind of nice.
You lose out on the second infusion sometimes. I mean, you might be able to get it from an enemy, right? Like you can probably get it from like a slime or something that you're beating up. But at the same time, like 40% Animo Res Shred. That's pretty
Yeah, you're
cool.
chilling.
On top of Faruzan's Res Shred. And then energy requirements for Faruzan become like achievable and realistic. If you have a team of all Animo, I mean. But then, like, you have Gene and Bennett for Sunfire, so that's kind of fun. It's groovy.
Yeah, Bennett was one of the first ones I was thinking of just for shenanigans with self-swirl.
Do you guys have any
basically-
thoughts on the new signature weapon coming out?
The bell.
The bell.
Or,
Yeah,
I'm
the
sorry.
bell.
A bell.
Oh, that's what we're calling it. The bell. Okay.
The true bell.
I think it's just okay. I think it's just okay. I think it's good. I think you'll get more damage than the next best options, but the more buffs that you stack on Wanderer, the less the signature weapon matters.
Yeah, I unironically just don't like it, because if you end up being in a situation where you want to use more AoE and you end up using your charge attacks, it's just worse than the other 5-star options, which is funny and sad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
I do.
if you don't have a 5-star catalyst and you really want to get him a 5-star catalyst, then yeah, that's probably the one you should be going for. But if you already have a 5-star catalyst, I don't think you should go for it.
Yeah, because like even at its most charitable, when I was doing the calcs, I think I got like 15% more than the next best. And again, that's being charitable. And typically, what I expect out of a signature weapon is like 20% or more better than the next best. But then once you add in Faruzan, once you add in Bennett, the difference becomes like 10%, 8%, 7%. And it's just like, is it worth? Because like getting a weapon, even on like the first try, because you only get it once every 3 pities or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So let's just say you get it on the first pity and you start from 0 pity. It's like easily a few $100s for like 8% damage increase. Is that worth it? You can buy a Switch with that amount of money.
I will say though, something I did notice about his weapon options, at least for the 5-star weapons, is there's not too many crit damage 5-star catalysts specifically. There's Kagura's, right? And then
It
his
doesn't
weapon.
matter.
Why
would you ever play a crit damage 5-star catalyst when you could just play the Wizard, huh?
Oh.
Riddle
Yeah.
me this!
Okay.
I don't
okay.
like Widsith. I think Widsith is overrated.
Oh,
In
I like
general or
Widsith.
on him?
I think people just really like how it cheats, but like the EM buff just isn't that great on Wander, and just having that one, it's not a dead buff, because like there's incidental swirl damage and stuff, so like it does a non-zero improvement, but at the same time it's just like it kneecaps it so much, and I just don't like playing with the RNG unless the character can benefit from like all of the buffs.
But RNG's fun.
I will say I do like
Let's
the
real
baseline
weapons.
stats for Widsith, like regardless of the passive it has. It's a good baseline.
Widsith is a good baseline, yeah. Like for free-to-play players, I think Widsith is great. But in almost every other case, I just like Solar Pearl more.
On Wanderer?
I mean, it's not as good on Wander, but typically in cases where I'm comparing between Widsith and Solar Pearl and normal attacks are relevant, I like
Yeah.
Solar Pearl more because it's more consistent. I like being able to turn my brain off when I play and not having to account for like having to reset Spiral Abyss to get the right buff or whatever. I think that's really annoying.
Well, just don't reset then, forehead.
Yeah, don't reset Giga Chad. Clear. Anyways, I will say I like I like the passive for Lost Prayers a lot because it's actually kind of just sick in Overworld. And
Yeah.
you spend 90% of your time in Overworld unless you're like those people that speedrun, which is a minority. One issue though with running like stuff like Lost Prayers is if you're a high invest gamer, it's so easy to overstack crit rate. At least that's the issue I'm running into for my account.
For Wanderer?
Yeah, because he has crit ascension, and if you get a Lost Prayer, that's a pretty beefy crit weapon.
Are you doing with cryo buffs?
No, I'm like overstacking.
Really?
Like, yeah.
We
Although I
also
think it's a
gotta-
high invest thing, though.
We gotta
Oh,
talk about
well,
the 5-star weapons a little bit, because Bennett changes the 5-star weapon rankings quite a lot. So like,
Memory of Dust, Giga Chad.
Memory of Dust is bonkers on Wander if
you don't have
you
Bennett,
don't use
yeah.
Bennett. But if
Yeah.
you do use Bennett, it is complete garbage. And like Kagura's Verity, if you assume no passive at all, becomes like super good. Just because it's just a crit damage stat stick. If you have Bennett.
Oh.
I like that there's a situation where Memory of Dust does something. Because there's not too many Catalyst
True.
users that want to just be on field with a shield until like now, right?
And the thing is like with Memory of Dust without Bennett, okay, so it's like first place is the Bell. Second place is Memory of Dust shielded. Third place is Memory of Dust unshielded.
Oh.
Like it's just the best 5-star option when you're not running Bennett and
I think
want to spend money on the save.
I think you missed first place with Sith with the good buff
The
active.
good buff.
But it's fine.
Yeah,
I'll
across
let it
one
slide.
rotation. Across one rotation.
Well, yeah, but it's so far ahead that the enemies aren't going to live for a second rotation.
Just
boy.
super clear.
That's very free to play relatable, ending Abyss floors in a single rotation.
True.
Very based take. We're speedrunners in this house.
Yeah,
I was playing Hyper Carry Shinyan today, and yeah.
I'm sorry.
This is what happens when you play Genshin every day.
I was playing Shinyan, Bennett, Kazuha Zhongli with C6 Bennett.
Okay.
And
Makes
on the
sense.
other side, I was playing Ningguang, Yunjin, Zhongli, Albedo.
Oh.
I'm glad to see Ningguang getting love, because Ningguang is like so thrown to the wayside.
Yeah. I mean,
They should fix her
it's not-
burst.
okay. It's so bad against the Thundering Manifestation. I bursted so I had to reset a few times to actually clear in time to get the 3 stars. But oh my god. How?
How is it that
Why?
bad? How is it that terrible?
I'm pretty sure that more than half of my bursts did not hit the manifestation.
Yeah, because sometimes not even a single one will hit, and they'll just go in every direction but where the enemy is, and it's just what the
Yeah.
hell? What the
The
hell,
JK
man?
is already bad enough. But the thunder manifestation just teleporting everywhere is how the fuck are you gonna hit it?
But so I was trying to talk about the 5-star weapons, and I ended up going on a tangent. But basically, if you don't have Bennett on your team, then you want Memory of Dust, and then you want Skyward Atlas. But if you do have Bennett, then you want Lost Prayer, and then Kagura's Verity.
Okay.
But yeah, I like Lost Prayer because it's we finally have a character who can take advantage of the buff.
That's also very interesting that we have a drastically changed weapon preference based on whether or not a character is in the team.
Well, it's
Well,
if you
Bennett
run
kind of does that
Bennett-
oftentimes on a lot of characters.
Because think about it in Wanderer's case. You throw Bennett on the team, you get, even on Prototype Rancor, the free-to-play 4-star weapon on Bennett, you're getting 871 flat attack. You're getting 30% attack from the Pyro Infusion. Bennett's probably running Noblesse Oblige, and so you're getting another 20% attack boost from that. And so there's just so much attack being stacked that it just completely trashes attack percent weapons.
Yeah, I'm just saying because I don't think I've seen such an exaggerated case where this happens. Like, I have seen it shift certain weapons down, but not to the extent. The only other characters that I can think of where this happens is just Hu Tao by default, and then Noelle with her very tiny weapons you'd even consider running on her.
Yeah, look, I have my spreadsheet up so I can give a comparison. So like I said with Memory of Dust, like without Bennett, it's like the best 5-star. But if you have Bennett, R1 Widsith is better than Memory of Dust.
Oh my god.
Widsith Giga-chan.
That's incredible.
In Dodoko Tales, I love Dodoko Tales, especially like when you're doing like the special Dodoko rotation. And there's a few reasons that you might want to do the charge attack spam, because there's no ICD, right? So you can just swirl as much as you want with the charge attacks. Unless I've got something completely wrong, right? But also, like, it's just nice to see an event weapon be so useful, like being competitive with like Widsith and like other 5-star options.
Yeah, that's really cool. I was really miffed that Dodoko Tales was kind of not ideal on a lot of the Catalyst users so far, so having one that does really leverage this is really nice for the players who did do that event, however delayed it was.
I just wish it was good on Klee. You know, the character it was designed for.
True. I hate it when weapons mismatch the characters.
I know, I want the drip.
The edgy guy reading a fucking book designed for children. The fucking irony. Oh, man.
Wander is just like, if you took Sasuke from Naruto and just made him a bigger brat. Just made him a whinier, brattier thing.
Oh, no. What about Totoko with Bennett? Person in chat is asking, how does it fare?
I will look it up. Okay, so with Bennett, it does fall off. So with Bennett, if you're doing mostly charge attacks, it's between an R1 and an R3 Solar Pearl.
Okay. That's still pretty good.
It's still not bad. But it's only like 4% above just using like a Black Cliff Agate. And this is again, when you have all these buffs up, like the differences start to diminish. So it's kind of expected almost.
Okay. Alright, well, he has a pretty decent low barrier to entry weapon. That's good. Because I know there are some characters who have really restrictive weapon choices, and having an accessible one be high up on the rankings in some context or another is very nice for the new or low budget players.
I agree. We got a question in chat asking R5 Dodoko or R5 Widsith? Widsith. I mean, I don't like Widsith. I think it's tacky and dumb and I don't like it, but Widsith, I can't deny that Widsith is just like most often the best 4-star you're gonna get.
Oh man.
All right, just an update for everyone. Zajef has to attend to something IRL, so he'll be taking his leave for now. But
it's okay. Bye, Zajef.
Yeah. And what haven't we talked about Wander? Oh yeah. What about National? Because every Animo unit works in National. I know a lot of people on my staff think it's omega cringe because it is very boring to put him in national.
Can I go on a
Oh,
tangent?
God.
Can I go on a tangent, please?
Sure. Yeah.
Oh,
Okay.
dear.
So I've been posting this on Twitter. Putting a new character in national or double hydro or a Bennett or just any Bennett Xiangling count, right? That is not evidence of the character being good, because these cores like national, Bennett Xiangling, double hydro, like Yelan and Xingqiu, they are so strong. You do not need a fourth character at all. The last like 4 or 5 spiral abysses, I was able to clear them with 36 stars with just the 3 characters, no fourth character. And in some cases, running the fourth character was a DPS loss.
Huh.
And so, like, yes, Wanderer works in National. Wanderer works in Double Hydro. You know who else works in Double Hydro? Main DPS, level 1 talent Goro.
Cool.
Well, I think
Very interesting.
there is merit to characters enhancing those strong cores, though, more so than other characters. Like, for example, Goro doesn't provide the VV. So
Yeah, of course.
I think it is notable that there are differences in how compatible characters are with the national archetype. Of course, I don't think his kit's very national forward, besides just being Animal Catalyst, which is the bare minimum for helping out national.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like where I would go first in terms of experimenting with him, but I'm not.
But I will
going to
say,
roll for him.
for double hydro though, I think it's actually pretty chill. I actually like that archetype a lot for him, because he's going to
Yeah,
be
that
normal
makes sense.
attacking oftentimes, and he can actually leverage the damage reduction and the stagger resist that Xingqiu provides. And he
That's
also
very
appreciates
true.
Yeah, he also appreciates damage percent from Yelan, because
Uh-huh.
I mean, he just has like pretty nice motion values with his E, and he just needs damage percent afterwards.
I mean, Double
Okay.
Hydro is it's just so much fun to play. Like, you can run any main I mean, I know I've already said this before. You can run any main DPS, but with Double Hydro, it's always fun. It's never not fun. You just get to see a bunch of laser beams. You get to see like Gilgamesh's Gate of Babylon open up, and it's just a bunch of like blue laser beams firing at everything.
Yeah.
Definitely
Also,
a
his
mood.
attack tracking is very good. Or not very, very good, but it is quite good. And that is very useful for double hydro, because the tracking on the rain swords and Yelan's dice will be dependent on the range of the character. So you'll notice a difference if you're playing like Hu Tao or a melee character, that the rain swords won't track as far as if you're playing Yoimiya or Yanfei. Specifically, Yanfei has really like good tracking for range, at least. It doesn't have the homing element though. That
I love. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, Wanderer has, as you guys probably have seen, he has like homing on his shots. So if the enemy moves, the missile tracks it. It's not like as crazy as how Yelan's projectiles will almost always hit, but it's pretty good to where you can't really complain. Like, and I think that's quite valuable in increasing his consistency. The only problem with his consistency is like getting hit without a shield or damage or stagger resist.
But like you said, Xingqiu helps with that a lot.
Yeah,
the
it's
damage
pretty
resistance
nice.
from Xingqiu it's so important for Wanderer.
Also, I was
Mhm.
gonna say I do like how his skill cooldown starts when he lands. So if you cut your rotation short, you're not waiting extra time for it to be back up. Like, the cooldown starts immediately when you land. I think that's pretty nice for doing more flexible rotations, or if you have to do adjustments for whatever the enemy's doing.
Speaking of that, we never really talked about the Hydro buff, the Hydro infusion on his A1. Because, like, we talked about Electro, we talked about Pyro, and we talked about Cryo, but people might be curious about whether the Hydro one is worth it, because it basically gives you more airtime.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I introduced the topic, so I didn't want to, like, lead with my thoughts. Do either of you have thoughts on the Hydro buff?
I think it's comfort. Like you can dodge
Yeah.
and you'll lose like what you would have gotten from the Hydro buff, and you're okay. You have normal uptime.
Yeah. That's
And
what
then
it
there's
feels
some
like to me,
situations
too.
where you can use the extended uptime to eke out if you just need to finish the boss. Or there's some situations where you just land at 10 seconds anyways. It just really depends on how you want to set up your teams.
Yeah, it feels like comfort. It doesn't really feel like anything super special. However, there is one crucial aspect of the Hydro infusion that has nothing to do with Spiral Abyss. But when you have Wander, Yelan, Kazuha, and Sayu in your overworld party, oh, you can go anywhere. It's
you
the
got good
ultimate
movement.
traveling party. Ultimate traveling party. Because like if you're moving horizontally, you either fly if you need to get across bridges or whatever. You have Yelan's insane movement speed. You have Sayu's taxi, so you never have to worry about sprinting stamina ever. And you have Kazuha to be able to infinite climb.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm probably gonna get Wanderer to Friendship 10 solely because of that.
Yeah, that definitely seems like a nice upgrade. Flying over just infinite climbing. Like, why would you need to climb at that point?
Anything that makes a character trivialize a part of overworld exploration is automatically very appealing to me, because when I'm trying to farm for my characters, and this is sort of back to being related to resource efficiency and such, time is a resource. So if you need to do like 5 hours worth of farming or something for God knows what reason, if you can condense it down to like an hour or 2 hours, that's a lot of resources being saved. So being able to zoom through everything, that's relevant.
Yeah.
I mean, like I said
everyone can be
before,
like
most
those.
players spend a good portion of their gameplay in overworld, whether it's doing the story quests or farming for the next character. A lot of it is in the overworld rather than Spiral Abyss, because you're only in there like once every 2 weeks if you play Spiral.
Some people are really cracked at overworld. I know some people who like 100% all the
Yeah.
regions like the very next day after they get released. Actually fucking crazy.
Is
I
there
think
anything?
no matter what. Oh, go ahead.
Oh no, you can go first. I was gonna ask them.
I was gonna say, at the end of the day, I don't like doing power evaluations, especially in pre-TC season. But I will say that Wanderer is fun, both in combat and in overworld, and I think that's a serious draw for some people. So like, if you play the game for fun, you'll probably have fun playing Wanderer.
Okay.
Even if it's not meta, he's not a must pull. He's not completely busted and insane, but he's fun, and he does his job.
That's a good addition.
Yeah, I'd agree that he's pretty fun.
Like, when I got Kazuha, and this is when everyone was calling him 5-star Sucrose. I got Kazuha because I just collect all the 5 stars, and as soon as I got the double jump, I'm like broken, completely busted, going straight to Friendship 10. Being able to double jump is just such a quality of life improvement.
Okay, so I know earlier we already talked about Faruzan's constellation. I guess we should just talk about Wanderers and get it like all sorted and out of the way. Let's start from the first one. It's the one that just gives him a attack speed and extra damage when he uses his A4 to dodge. What do you guys think about it?
It does stuff. It's like, it's perfectly okay. It is a constellation.
It's attack speed, so that is all you'll get out of us.
Like,
Yeah.
You're not wasting your money. Like, you're not getting nothing for the investment, but it's nothing like I'm gonna write home about. I'm not gonna tell you to go for C1.
Yeah, I'm very lukewarm about it. For context, I'm a player who generally does get like constellations for characters, like sometimes C6s on 5 stars, but I don't really, I mentioned it earlier, I don't really value C1 that much because, well, it does feel better, and that does have like value to some people, feeling better, like having smoother attacks. But the sheet increase, like the amount of damage he does, doesn't go up that much with C1. And I guess it is important to mention that he does scale with attack speed well compared to a lot of characters, because catalysts, they don't have hit lag, which is what happens when claymores, for example, if you hit an enemy with a claymore, you'll notice that there's some freeze frames. Those don't get affected by attack speed, but since Wanderer is a catalyst, he doesn't really have freeze frames on his projectiles, so he gets more efficient use out of attack speed. On top of the fact that most of his damage is from doing normal attacks, and then, you know, there's a smaller portion for his burst damage. Overall, yeah, I think it's kind of C2, it's basically when he stays in his air form long enough, he gets more damage for his burst, going up to like 200%, which is pretty high. What do you guys think about that one?
I like it. I think if people wanted to get constellations, I like C2. I don't think it's a game-breaking constellation. Like, I think we have constellations from right here. So from C0 to C2, you're getting a good like 25+% bonus. That's including the buff from C1. So from 0 to C2. C1 to C2 is like another 15% increase, which is respectable. It's like the difference from going from like the second best weapon to someone's best weapon. I like it because it gives a reason to burst every rotation. And I really like the burst. So that's not necessarily like a min-maxing thing, but I like it. I think C2 is fun. I think it's pretty good. It gives a respectable damage buff. And it changes his playstyle a little bit.
Okay. My thoughts on it, I think it does have some useful applications in certain speedrunning setups, because now you have a button that just nukes, and the nuke is sizable. Some people compare it to the initial hit for Raiden when she has C2, assuming you're playing a team that buffs Wanderer's damage, like a Faruzan team with Bennett. Pressing that button will do a pretty substantial nuke, and that can be really good if you're fighting against floors with staggered enemy counts and you just want to nuke the second wave. But it is kind of clunky. I don't like that you can't just press it in neutral and get benefit from it. You have to be in the air for X amount of time before it gets the damage boost, the sizable amount. And that goes in hand with the problem that if you use your burst, you don't fly anymore. You are instantly grounded afterwards. So it's a finisher, but it does do a lot of damage. It's just could be awkward for some setups, but I mean, it's okay. My gripe is like going C1 then C2. It's just, you're not really doing it for him. You're doing it to get Faruzan if you're investing that much into pulling on this banner that's coming up. Then C3 is pretty, I think it's pretty easy to say. It's pretty useless. No. Well,
it is the second most useless.
It's just not that good. Like,
the challenge constellations are just really shit.
Yeah, you do more nuking damage, but like, again, like a lot of his damage is also still auto attacks. It's not like he's a character that only does burst damage, but it'll make the speedrunning thing a bit more smoother. But
I mean, C3 from C2, it's like being generous, 5-6% bonus damage. It's just not that great by the numbers. And then C5 is even lower. It's like less than 4%.
Yep. Like, talent increases are nice in constellations when the character like does a majority of their damage in like one of their abilities, but since his is split a bit, it's not as nice.
Yeah.
I guess we can go with C4 now. C4, you just get another infusion, and it's a random one. I don't like it that much, but it's there. That's how I feel about a lot of his constellations. It's like I don't really quite like them that much. You can
None of
hit
them are, like,
a good
casting it.
situation where you get the crit rate one when you're normally not supposed to. But the problem with that is if you're a C4 gamer or C4 plus, you probably have good artifacts and you're probably like dangerously close to 80 to 90% crit. So that doesn't really help you as much. And then on the other hand, the energy, the electro buff that gives you more energy, you're probably not going to be using it that much because at the C4 level, you probably have C6 Faruzan, which makes your energy requirement drop to like 130. And then on top of that, your artifacts are, again, going to be quite good. So you'll likely have 5% ER on every piece because that's what you generally want to aim for when you're like Giga min-maxing is you have like crit rate, crit damage, and ER on all your pieces, like all three instead of just crit rate, crit damage. And that means you'll just hit the ER requirements anyway, so you don't benefit from the electro buff. So that's why I don't really like it. Like it doesn't make sense for a player who's well invested because it doesn't solve any problems and it doesn't give him anything that he would want because you already fix it through your build. Like
Yeah,
whether
that just
you
seems like a marginal benefit, right? In the first place, even ignoring all of the nuances on whether or not each individual mode is useful.
yeah. Like even if you could leverage those buffs, they're not that big of a deal to begin with. And C5 is especially bad because from my understanding, his E scaling with talent levels, it works like Yoimiya where you get very little increased damage for leveling up the talent because it starts at a high base value and it increases very marginally with each level because of the way it multiplies with the normal attacks. So C5 like legit gives you not that much. I think Emmy probably has the numbers if she wants to talk about it.
It's like 3.5%, 3.8% being generous. So like if you have C4 and you're like, do I want to go for C5? Do you really want to spend like $200 to $400 on 3% extra damage? Like imagine like because remember this, what Zajef said earlier, the serotonin, right? The bigger number, the more serotonin. Is 3% more serotonin worth $200?
I don't think serotonin's linear scaling to begin with, but
it's not. But it's just a fun thing to phrase it.
All right, so C6. Any fellow whales in the chat right now? Any C6ers? Okay, cool. So no one to disappoint.
It's not.
Yeah, the C6 isn't that good. I don't like it at all. I mean, sure, it's his best constellation by far, and it does give. And when you're playing C6 Wander, you're playing a team that just hyper buffs the crap out of him. So you're making your team DPS scale pretty well with the constellation. It's not like you're increasing a small portion of your whole team's damage. He's a majority of the damage. But, I mean, it's not tuned to be particularly high in terms of how much you get. Like
it's like a 25% buff, which is significant, right? But, like, most of the C6s on other 5-stars, like, we've been able to see, like, throughout the last, 4 or 5 patches on 5-stars that by the time you get C6, your damage output should be about doubled, if not a little bit more. But with Wanderer, like after C6, doesn't even hit the 100% mark. It's like 75% more damage total.
Those cons
also,
are overall pretty bad, right?
Yeah.
They're not bad. They're whelming. They're not underwhelming. They're not overwhelming. They're just whelming.
Nah, guys, I'm going to say it for real. I think they're bad.
You think they're bad?
I don't like it.
Saying,
I think they're not worth the money.
Well, that's just how it is, right? We all of our conversations have skewed pretty negative.
Yeah.
I just noticed, so that's why I'm saying that.
Is Wanderer good? So I'm pretty like chill with or like okay with evaluating power early on a character. Some TCRs might not be, but I think it's how good he is very dependent on if you have C6 Faruzan or not. Because if you have C6 Faruzan and you're playing Wanderer C0, right, which is like a situation that's not going to happen right now unless you wait for future banners. But if you have those two things, and you slap your essential units like Bennett or whatever on him, he's going to be performing relatively well. From the calcs I've seen, slightly more damage than an Ito team. But keep in mind, his damage is a little bit more on the single target side. I mean, I know his attacks have AoE, but like it's not like consistent. But I mean, it's like slightly more damage than a Ito team, which is pretty respectable. I think it's good. Definitely not like, or you wouldn't be unhappy with that kind of performance. But without C6 Faruzan, it becomes a lot worse. You're losing a lot of your damage just from having to adjust. Like your energy requirements go down. You have less application on your buffs. Like this is not even counting the fact that you're not getting the crit damage buff anymore from C6. You're not getting consistent shredding, which just makes your DPS drop. So I think a lot of people, when they have under C6 Faruzan, they can try to mitigate it with a strong driver unit, or like a unit for a Wanderer to drive, like 𝐒𝐭𝐚𝐫𝐌𝐚, Xiao, and you'll perform fine, right? You can already like kind of like if you want to see how he plays right now on live, just play Sucrose with double Hydro, and the performance is kind of around there. If you're not running Faruzan, you'll have like more normal attack damage than Sucrose, of course. You won't have the EM buff, so your Electro Charge swirls and stuff will do less. But that's how I see it. Is he really does get an identity when he gets to have a C6 Faruzan. Without C6 Faruzan, his identity becomes a lot weaker, unfortunately.
The way I like to evaluate power levels is, first off, I try to identify what job the character has. So like, Wanderer is an animal hyper carry. Does Wanderer do his job as an animal hyper carry? I'd say yes. He does the job. He gets it done. Is he the only one that does that job? No, we have Xiao, and we can't really say which one's better at the moment between Wanderer and Xiao if you have like the same resources across both teams.
Well, they have different like specialties to begin with, because Xiao is very AoE based. Wanderer is much more single target.
Okay, so that helps separate them a little bit more. So like we do have Wanderer with his own niche as being a single target animo DPS hyper carry. Is he the best at what he does? Maybe compared to other animo DPSs that are also trying to be single target, but I just don't like comparing it to like if you have Hu Tao and double Hydro, like you don't gotta worry about anything, right? But ultimately the game's designed so that you can basically clear Abyss with anybody. So Wanderer is good in my view, not insane. Like he's not fantastic, but he's good. He's fun. He does his job well, and he does something that most people don't. And he flies.
Most important.
Dude, that's been
An
like,
overworld buff.
that's been the joke between me and a bunch of TCers is he flies. There's some people I know that really dislike his performance, and like when people say that he flies, they get annoyed about that comment. But I mean, I think he's I don't want to like be that uncharitable towards him, like, because when he has the C6 Faruzan, which you'll get eventually if you plan your primo pools well, because like a lot of sheets will assume a C6 4-star in general. Like people assume people have C6 Fischl, and they've been doing that like pretty early on too even, and eventually it becomes a reasonable expectation. So once you get to the point where you have C6 Faruzan in the future, you're gonna have a pretty good unit combination. Like Wanderer plus C6 Faruzan is, I can strongly say, is good. Like you're not gonna
Yeah.
It's not like I'm saying it's good and I'm coping so you don't feel bad. No, it's good.
Yeah, like, if you're worried about whether or not you'll be able to 36-star Abyss with Wanderer, the answer is yes. You will be able to 36-star Abyss with Wanderer.
Well, not even just that. You'll do it well. Like, you have good
Yeah.
matchups. I don't want it to seem like we have the bar just to 36-star, because he by far surpasses that bar with his
Yeah, easily.
ideal teams.
The reason I say that is because a lot of people, they typically just want to win with their faves. And so, often, many people's expectations might just be, can I clear everything that I want to with this character? In which case, yes, you can clear it. But beyond that, you know, it's of course subject to change, it depends, all the other variables.
Mm-hmm. I also would like to mention that he's pretty darn flexible with a lot of units.
Yeah,
like,
that's one thing I really like about him.
Like, if you like random units and you just want to force things to happen, you can just put the unit in his team and it's probably okay. I mean, sure, there's some units that just don't fit with him whatsoever, but like his pool is a lot larger than a lot of units. It's not like he's stuck in the like how Ito's stuck in the Geo ecosystem where he's forced to have very specific pairings. Wanderer, the only like specific pairing he needs if you want to do Wanderer damage is like Faruzan. But even if you don't care about him doing the majority of the damage, you can slot in a bunch of other characters. You can slot in double Hydro, you can slot in Taser teams, you can slot in even like, you know, teams that still buff his damage but not have Faruzan if you just don't want to. There's all kinds of in-betweens, and it's pretty decent. Like, it's nice.
I think that is worth highlighting an extra little bit, just because like, one of the big trends with hyper carries is that hyper carries tend to be confined to like one composition, or like 2 or 3 compositions, right? Like Hu Tao, you want Xingqiu, you want a shielder, and then you want another character to complement it, right? With Ito, you want Goro, you want Zhongli, and then you want either Albedo or whoever else is around. But Wanderer seems to be the most flexible hyper carry, to my knowledge.
I mean, it's way more flexible than like Eula.
Yeah, Eula has like one team, but you just replace the characters of the same element for different results. Whereas with Wanderer, like, you can just run anything. Not anything, like, don't pair Wanderer with Ito or Diluc, but pair him with supports that make at least minimally reasonable sense, and you'll be fine.
That's good. He's a flexible unit in that case. It's I guess that also has a lot to do with being Animo.
Being Animo's a big bonus, because at the very, very worst, if you have no resources at all, he still does a fine Sucrose impression. It's not great, but it functions.
I'm waiting for the fucking EM Wanderer to happen. It happened to Raiden. It'll happen again. I'm just waiting.
It's not an if, it's a when.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Somebody will figure it out.
Yeah.
By the way, guys,
Folk will do it.
Since Zajef is gone, do you think we want to do the card segment right now, the card game segment, or do you think it'd be better to save it for later?
I can talk a bit about it.
Okay.
There's not too much to say because of our limited play testing that I've done with Zajef, but I'll explain a bit about what we've learned. So,
okay.
There's not a whole lot of official gameplay, but there have been translated lists of all the cards, and some of them are a bit sketchy, and I know some of them have changed, but the gameplay is very much, it's more similar to how the Pokemon video games play. You have a team, and you just swap around, and you do setups, and you sweep the enemy team in 1 turn or 2 turns. And it's very, very, very fast paced at this point in time because a lot of the great decks out there are very burst oriented, so they tend to flatten you in like one turn on turn 3. Like that's the critical turn.
We have a turn 3 format. I like this. And just for the background for everyone listening, me and Mono both play a lot of Magic.
Yeah.
So we're very familiar with like card game terminology and stuff like that.
So the game works, there's like slow actions and fast actions. So things like if you swap without any other card effects that makes it so it's fast, you pass priority to your opponent. So they can play cards or activate a character skill that's slow action. So you can just alternate back and forth. You do like simultaneous alternating turns. So even though it's turn 3, it's not like Magic the Gathering where it's player 1 does their whole turn and passes to the opponent, and then they do their whole turn, pass to the opponent. You play your second land, and then you kill your opponent. No, that's not what I mean. It's not that degenerate. Even though it's turn 3, your opponent still has a lot of opportunities with priority, so it's still
interactive.
fun. Yes.
It's an interactive, fast-paced game. And so when we use the term interaction in card games, what we mean is that like you don't just have to sit there while your opponent just like throws a bunch of cards on the table. Like you can do things about what they're doing.
Everything is basically an instant flash then? Well, almost everything. So there are a subsection of cards that are just talent skills, which are basically just a type of card that you attach to the character, and it automatically makes them execute whatever skill it is, or burst, depending. And those are slow actions, so naturally playing those cards would pass priority to your opponent. But you are correct, most cards do not directly let you pass to your opponent. There are some exceptions, but I don't think we can really get into those details right now. But
I have a question for you.
Hmm?
How do you feel? Because I haven't looked into this as much as you have. How do you feel about the mana system?
It's interesting. So the thing is about how most of the characters are organized. So you have by default 8 dice. Only 8. But normals and skills and most bursts cost 3. So if you want to have efficient turns where you want to set up a lot or sweep when you eventually get there, you want to have extra dice at that point in the game. So you want to play a lot of cards that give you those extra dice. So there's Paimon, who gives you like some Omni dice on the next 2 turns after you play her. Really good card, by the way. If you turn 1 Paimon, and you'll just pay 3 dice on 1 turn to get 2 extra Omni on your next turns, and then you have efficient, flexible turns to use. There's also a lot of ways you can manipulate the results of the dice, or even just re-roll them again if you want. But generally, what I've seen is the best way to do it is just have methods of guaranteeing Omni and then using the elemental tuning feature to correct whatever dice are not right. So to refresh our memories, the elemental tuning thing is whenever it's your turn, this is a fast action, you can discard any card in your hand, and then one of the dice becomes the same element as your active character. So it's these are all ways to fix your colors, so to say.
Okay, so I have two questions.
Mhm.
The first one is about the RNG when it comes to resource management. Because you
Okay.
had to like get it randomized at the start of the game, right?
Okay, at the start of the game you draw 5 cards and you can mulligan each individual card one time. So you can mulligan like 2 of the 5 cards or 1 of the 5 cards or none or all of them. But that's the only mulligan you get. But it's a 30 card deck and there is a lot of card draw. And I mean a lot. Like you can fucking dig if you really need to. But
Is it like Pot of Greed? Or is it like Divination?
yes. It's Pot of Greed level draw.
Oh my god.
Yes.
That's
But,
insane.
The thing is, though, like, cards don't directly win you the game. And there's not really any attrition style of gameplay where you can just win off raw card advantage. It's just not going to happen. You're going to
I
die.
see.
So, even though there is a lot of card draw, at some point your hand stops really mattering, because at the end of the day, on turn 3, you're going to be spending the majority of your dice, or literally all of your dice, on the character you're sweeping with and flattening your opponent. So it's mostly just setting up. So what do I mean by setup? So there are, as you saw in the gameplay trailer, there are artifact cards, and there are weapon cards, and there are also the talent cards, as well as food. So these are the types of things that you can use to set up a certain combination. So you can do things like have a character eat minty meat rolls, which reduces the cost of normal attacking by 1 black dice. So you have a 1 black, 1 of their element normal attack, which is extremely strong. You can, with 9 dice, you can have them attack 4 times, which is already overkill for most characters by default. And God forbid you have other multipliers like a weapon or something. Or reactions. So it's kind of crazy how much damage you can put out with the right first 2 turns.
And I have one more question if you're willing to humor me.
Okay.
So in many resource-based card games, one big problem in design is what we call the 1 mana problem. And the 1 mana problem is basically where a game is streamlined to the point where the things that cost the fewest resources are always the most powerful. Is that the case with Genius Invocation?
Well, the thing is, most of the things that actually... Let me pull up the list. So, most of the things that actually, like, involve directly increasing your damage all really start at 2 and above, aside from things that increase your damage directly. Most things that are like 0 or 1 are just utility. So they either let you swap as a swap 1 time as a fast action. The only real exception to that is minty meat rolls, the example I gave. That's the only one cost that I can think of that's really something I'd consider set up for a sweep. And then at 2 and above, you have all of the artifacts and weapons and other things that are very critical to ensuring that you win on turn 3. So it's not that they're better, it's just that at 0 and 1 they do very different things than the things at 2 and 3 or above.
That's good.
So
Yes.
Mono, we have a question from TK. He's asking if do you think there's an opportunity for a competitive scene for this game, and do you think MiHoYo would leverage it? I think that's a pretty good question for anyone thinking about playing this game.
I definitely believe in a competitive scene for this game. I have seen a lot of talk about grassroots tournament scene. I will definitely be participating in that on release.
As will I.
And yeah, we're going to see what we can do about organizing tournaments. It's going to be weird because I've heard it's very time gated, so there won't be a level playing field until 3 weeks after the patch drops or so.
So you have training time. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, it's good for early exploration anyway, but it'll definitely be interested to see what types of formats would be good, because I'm not sure. Like, at first I was looking at the cards and I thought, maybe a sideboard wouldn't really be that great. But the more I look at it, there are a lot of the cards aren't as generic as you'd think. There's a lot of sharp archetypal nuance in whether each card is playable. Like, some decks have doing chip damage as part of their strategy. Like, for example, so they want to get each character to, like, say 8 health down from 10. Well, all characters start with 10. To make their setup work, if that opponent has cards that heal, then it makes things awkward, because then your opponent also has to commit more resources to keeping you in that critical range, so it can slow them down. So it's good against incremental repeated damage, but on the same token, if that other player plays against a deck that does not have chip damage as part of their setup at all, then the heal cards will do quite literally nothing.
Okay.
So
I do have some questions about the card game because I haven't looked at it yet, and I'm not particularly a card game player, but I know some of the terminology from playing it casually. How easy do you think it is to get into this card game? Because many Genshin players might not be like well versed in card games. This might be their first foray, and they might just try it out because it has their favorite characters on the card.
Okay, so on an individual level, the cards are not very complicated. Like, most of them just have a singular effect.
Okay.
And the cards are not very wordy. It's usually a single sentence effect, and there are no keywords at all. So it's very low complexity, and the card descriptions are as literal as they can be.
Reading the card explains the card?
Okay, that's very nice. So you don't have to have a lot of domain knowledge of knowing what a specific word means, like a specific effect, and that you have to dig deep to figure out how that works. It's just list, like, I do 1 more damage, or I provide this, and it's very straightforward. That's good.
There's some unclear things, but I'm not certain if it's because of translation or things have changed or what, but yeah.
The fact that there are archetypes is really reassuring to me, because when you combine archetypal diversity with simple pieces, like if the individual pieces are simple, but like there's many different ways you can put them together to make interesting stuff, I think that is a hallmark of a really good card game.
Yeah, even though the pool is very small, 30 deck slots is not a lot. You're quickly going to realize there's like 20 other cards that you want to add, but then you have to start cutting shit. So it's
That's true in
very
every
painful.
card game, though.
And how's like how long are matches typically when you tried playing it?
10 minutes.
10 minutes?
If it's with a very competent playtester. If you use slower methods, it can be longer. Sometimes if both players stumble and then the game goes to turn 4, but the games should be very quick, especially on live where everything is resolved for you.
And if you have to make like an analogy or a comparison with other existing card games, do you think the Genshin one is similar to any of the current ones on the market? Like, let's say, Pokemon or Legends of Runeterra, Hearthstone, any of those? Magic the Gathering?
Yu-Gi-Oh!
Okay.
You forgot about Yu-Gi-Oh! The thing that
Yu-Gi-Oh,
it's ripping
yeah.
off of?
Well, the thing about Yu-Gi-Oh! Is, like, there's no summons or sacrifice. That's the thing, it's kind of like a hodgepodge of everything, so it's got absurd card draw from, like, the most busted Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards of all time. It has, like, overall strategy of the video game Pokemon, not the card game Pokemon, just to clarify. I'm talking about the video game. You heard me refer to as, like, sweeping, and there's also trapping effects. So, like, Jean and Sucrose can use their skill to kick your opponent's active character back to the previous one, so you can use that skill to chase down a disadvantaged character, for example. So those are Pokemon terms, and I do like to think of strategy in that light. And then there's also just the elemental system, their reactions. So you can't really point to a single card game that plays exactly like this. It's a very original blend, which I do like.
I'm very
Okay.
excited to hear that.
Yes. On the topic of randomness, there are exactly 0 cards that have any randomness whatsoever in their resolution. The variance is entirely determined by hand variance and your dice, which can be mitigated a lot. So
That was my biggest worry about the RNG with the dice. Because, like, nobody likes getting mana screwed or mana flooded.
yeah, on that topic, the Omni, the presence of Omni in the game really makes it so that you have a lot of interesting decision making about how exactly you structure your turn. Is if you have only like a few Omni and not enough of what you want, you can just decide if you want to use your dice as is and preserve your hands for other purposes, or you can just tune and do your original plan. So I think there's a lot of rich gameplay going on there, and also like some decks just don't really care about fixing. So how skills work in this game is normal attacks use 2 black and 1 of the element that character is. So what I mean by 2 black is the dice can be literally anything. So it's a very trivial dice restriction to meet. So decks that use normal attacking as part of their strategy don't really care about fixing at all, because you are very realistically going to have the dice to do what you want. And On the other hand, if they are reliant on skills, then you would need fixing in some form to realistically be able to get 3 of the same dice. Or use one of the many ways to generate Omni so that you can work around it. And there's a bunch of different ways to do this, depending on what your deck uses, what types of slots. There's support cards that fix, there's a whole set of artifacts that fix, and there are skill cards that fix. So it just depends on what your deck restrictions are, what options you'd consider. So it's very manageable RNG.
That's
It's
good.
it's almost non-existent because you can dig so hard too. So it's like there's some draw RNG like on what you play on turn 1, but over the course of the whole game, you're going to see half your deck at minimum.
That checks out, yeah. Is there ever a reason not to play Pot of Greed?
It costs dice, and you need to stop spinning your wheels midway around turn 2, early turn 2.
Okay, so it does cost resources to use.
Yes, most cards cost dice, so
Okay.
the
Much better than Yu-Gi-Oh!
yeah, like most of the card draw spells that cost 0 are either delayed or conditional, like Chang the Ninth, but the vast majority of them cost dice in one way or another, so they do slow you down. And it is a fast meta, so you do have to stop.
Okay, good to know.
Yeah, like people were Kane's in the chat, so some decks don't want to run strategize. Like people were memeing about literal Pot of Greed, but I did find myself cutting it because like running 10 copies of Draw 2 in some decks is just not feasible, and strategize is probably the worst one. Like I cut strategize from my deck. And for what strategize is, it's just literally one of any dice action card. You play it and you draw 2. No strings attacks. Nothing else. No conditions. And that card is weak. Relatively. Believe it or not. In some decks.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. It's a very high power level. I've been playing Noel decks, and Akane has been playing a lot of reaction heavy decks. The Kole decks are very, very powerful. It's very tricky to withstand taking catalyzing field and Oliver burst ticks.
One question I have is, how closely does the card game mirror or like represent like the characters in Genshin Impact? Like when you're playing a Diluc deck or whatever, does it have carry over a lot of the same things as like the normal Genshin gameplay? Because that's something I notice quite a bit in, like, for example, League of Legends and Legends of Runeterra, is like the cards match up with the characters really well.
They are restrained in some ways because I think they've been they try to keep the word count very low, like in most cases. But like for Diluc's example, like you know how his E has multiple casts.
Yes.
In the CCG or TCG, GCG, whatever, you're encouraged to use his skill multiple times so it does increase damage, and there's some cards that do support using the exact same skill multiple times. So in a Diluc deck, you would be encouraged to use his skill multiple times and stack him in particular, and which in my opinion is not a very good strategy, but it is a strategy, and you do start with Diluc. So
Yeah, so overall, do you think Genshin players will be happy about this inclusion to the game? Just like having a card game?
I think so. Like, even if they're just in it for the cosmetics in the short term and they aren't going to go out and engage with the rest of the community on once they finish ranking up, then they'll be fine with it. I don't think it'll be like fishing, where it's just a chore for most people. But
fishing. I still have an R5 to the catch.
Same.
Oh my god. Yeah, I haven't even bothered because I have just a ridiculous armory for spears in general, so the catch doesn't even do anything for me. But yeah, but for the people who do want to get engaged and are insanely disappointed with MiHoYo for not being willing to make a competitive scene or a ladder right out of the gate, don't worry, there are people who are looking to create a space for the spikes.
We'll make it.
Yes.
All right. All right. So this podcast has been going on for about 2 hours now, so I think it's a good time to wrap it up.
I agree.
Yeah. Any closing comments? First, I would like to thank the WFP team for making all these art assets. I think it looks very nice and cute. I'd like to thank our artists here. I'll pull up the credits screen. These are the wonderful guys and gals that have worked on our basically all the chibis on the screen and the background art. Mono, is there anything you want to plug about your socials for people who want to know what you're up to or where to find you?
No, not really. I just stream on the Keqing Twitch once in a while. I haven't lately, but I'm going to be doing a lot more of that once the card game drops. I've been away from the game, but I am definitely going to be doing a fuckload of exploration. I still have a lot of questions as to how exactly some things resolve, but we will see.
Emmy, is there any thing you want to plug for the end of the stream? Perhaps like Twitch or Twitter or even your Discord, where to find you?
Well, my Discord tag is on the screen right now, so I don't really need to say anything there. If you follow me on Twitter, I will tweet a lot about Genshin and then other things that you don't care about at all. But you should follow me anyways.
And well, Zajef isn't here right now, so I'll just plug for him in his place. Yeah, he streams on twitch.tv/Zajef77, as you see, pretty often. I know he also has a YouTube channel that he basically releases pretty good educational content on Genshin Impact, whether it's to understand why people play certain teams or understanding the new characters before they come out, all kinds of good stuff. And I think he does a great job at consolidating information for people who are interested in how Genshin works, but maybe not as dedicated to really deep dive and calc everything. So if you want to find out if a character is good or bad, he'll probably have a good answer to that in his videos.
Zajef has really good videos. Yeah, I like his content a lot.
Good content. As for myself, I don't really use social media that much. I do have my Twitter handle KB Genshin, but I rarely tweet on it. But sometimes I will. At most, it's usually just talking about what I think about characters. But more so, if you want to contact me, Discord is probably a better place. You'll find me in WFP, and you can just @ me if you have anything particular to say, and I'll probably be able to respond. But yeah, think that's it. Also, there is another artist that isn't on this list that I forgot to type in Teamune. She worked on some of the art stuff here too. So again,
Is Toji on here?
oh, is there another person I forgot? Dang, so many talented artists on our team. But yeah, I'd like to thank our team for working on this, especially including our theory crafting team. I know Emmy and I are the heads, but a lot of the stuff we talked about, some of it was discovered from our staff working on the projects. So I'd like to give them a big shout out, and they're doing good work. They've been writing a lot of helpful guides before the characters come out, and it's really neat stuff.
I want to say thank you to Reich and Edulus for helping me as much as they did on everything. Reich has carried me through so much. I always appreciate him, and he deserves more recognition than he has.
Yeah.
So
Thankless job.
yeah. So
He's
that'll
our
be
math
it.
wizard.
So that'll be it for this stream. The next one will be basically a week before the next patch comes out, where we'll be covering a certain character that will be coming out in the future. I won't tell who. But other than that, have a nice day, everyone, or a nice night if you're late where you're at, and we'll be signing off.
All right.
Take care.
Peace.